Morning. Thanks for coming round. I'm Sally.
Morning. So just before we get started, I'll just make a few notes. So, we're at 15 Hill Street.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, great. And then I need to write down your contact information, just for the office, you know. So, first, what's your surname, please, Sally?
It's Keyworth. I'll spell that. Keyworth.
And your phone number, I've got that somewhere. Yes, 027 584 6613.
That's right.
Okay, Sally, so what building work would you like to have done?
Well, let's go into the kitchen first. So, you see, it's quite dark in here. We've tried having a few lights fitted, but it hasn't really made any difference. So, what we've decided is the window is too small. We'd like a larger one.
That shouldn't be a problem. And is there anything else you'd like done in the kitchen?
Well, at this time of year, I shouldn't complain really, but I wish it wasn't so hot in here. Is there anything you can do about that?
Air conditioning?
It's too expensive.
How about a fan then?
Yes, that would be perfect.
Righto. And what's next, Sally?
Well, if we walk through into the bathroom, the thing is, when my father's staying, he can't use the bath. So I thought here, on the back wall, I'd like you to fit a shower. Is that possible?
Shouldn't be too hard. I'll get you some brochures because there are a few ways of doing that.
Thanks.
Now, those tiles on the wall look new, so do you want to keep those?
Yes, the tiles are new, but actually my husband doesn't like them. We want to change to those very small ones, but do I have to choose a colour now?
You can do that later. I'll get some charts for you to look at.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
Now the last thing, let's walk outside. I need to show you some things outside the house.
Righto. Oh, nice garden. And the fence looks in good condition.
Yes, it's new, but the thing is the gate. It's too low. You have to bend down to open it. We need something that's higher.
Right, I'll see to that.
Then the other thing is the garage here. We had a break-in, actually.
Yeah, I can see. The door should be fine, but the lock. I'll replace that, shall I?
Yes, thanks. Then also, if you step back here and look up on the roof, you can see that it's damaged.
Did that happen in the storm a couple of weeks ago?
Yes, that's right.
I'll get up there and take a look at that then. That might be quite a big job, but I'll get back to you once I've had a look.
OK.
I can see that your rain gutter is broken as well.
Can you fix that?
Well, I'll need to replace it, maybe with a steel one. It'd be stronger.
No, plastic will be fine, thanks. It's cheaper.
OK.
And that's everything, I think. Is there any other information you need? What about a start date?
Well, I'm completely booked all April, and I've got a job on May the 5th. That'll be a few days, so let's say May the 8th.
OK.
Now, what about a key in case you're out?
We have a security code. I'll give you that. It's a mix of letters and numbers. The code is AG4176.
Got that. OK, we'll organise some...
That is the end of Part 1. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 1.
John, how is it going with your research on water hyacinth?
Well, I went on a field trip on my own and collected the primary data. After I came back, I also referred to the published data.
So, what do you know about this plant?
The water hyacinth grows in tropical countries. It has beautiful purple-blue flowers, but everybody hates it.
Why is that?
The water hyacinth, as the world's worst invasive aquatic plant, has attracted significant attention. Millions of these plants grow in rivers and lakes and have brought huge environmental and cultural problems to the local people. Farmers cannot travel in boats on the water and thus cannot fish in it. In addition, heavy free-floating mats of water hyacinth are clogging the dam at the power station in West Africa. Turbines of the power station are often shut down because of the intertwined leaves. Dams often cease to function as a result, severely restricting the electricity generation. Dense mats of water hyacinth also shade the surface and prevent algae growth, thus limiting the production of oxygen and threatening the survival of fish.
So, where did water hyacinth originate from?
The water hyacinth is native to the Amazon basin in Latin America. It has spread mainly to the tropics and subtropics throughout much of the world since the 1800s. Later, it was introduced into Europe and Africa as an ornamental garden pond plant due to its beauty. Flowers of this plant were being sold in local markets in African countries as a source of income for women. Since the 1900s, this weed has infested lakes, rivers, and creeks of the delta areas in West Africa.
I guess whoever introduced this plant had never expected the disastrous impact it would have on the local ecological environment. What kind of habitat does water hyacinth thrive most in?
Well, it has been discovered that the nutrient-rich environment contributes significantly to the rapid proliferation of this weed, which obtains its nutrients directly from the water. This is normally compounded with a decrease of nutrients along the river banks.
Why is that?
The main reason for soil nutrient loss is that local residents cut down trees. Excessive deforestation accelerates soil erosion, which indirectly compounds this issue. Without enough trees to retain nutrients in the soil, frequent rain might partly aggravate this by carrying some of the nutrients into the waterways.
Are there any effective measures to control or even eradicate this weed?
Yes, a number of approaches have been widely applied throughout the world. Among them, biological control is the most widely favored long-term control method by introducing a type of insect that feeds on water hyacinth. So far, Nigeria has used this method for 6 months. However, the water hyacinth won't be removed immediately. The side effects of this method on the local ecology will remain unforeseen for years because it takes time for this external insect species to reach a density sufficient enough to affect ecological development.
Then what about other approaches? Is there a quicker way to control it?
Well, the mechanical removal of water hyacinth is seen as the best short-term solution. This option includes harvesting plants and in-site cutting. This method can immediately open physical space for fish and boat traffic. It is, however, inefficient for workers to process extensive areas, and costly to use large cutting and dredging equipment. Ironically, it costs even more to dispose of this plant than to remove it.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30. Can we make use of this weed and turn it into something good?
Now scientists think that water hyacinth can be useful. The plant itself, although more than 95% water, has a fibrous tissue and a high energy and protein content and can be used for a variety of useful applications.
So what do people do with water hyacinth that is initially removed?
First, the cut-down water hyacinth is left to dry under the sun for a few days before being mixed with ash and animal manure. The mixture can be used as alternative soil rather than fertilizer. It can grow crops with increased yield.
That sounds interesting.
Mushroom farmers can benefit from water hyacinth as well. Using the mixture mentioned earlier, mushrooms generally grow much faster so that farmers can harvest mushrooms sooner, which enables them to make money faster.
I see. It can be used to grow oyster and straw mushrooms, right?
Yes. In India, attempts have been made to grow these types of edible mushrooms organically utilizing water hyacinth. These mushrooms provide sufficient nutritional values, including minerals and high-quality protein, which are essential to people's level of fitness.
Right. Are there any other measures taken to utilize water hyacinth?
In Southeast Asia, people feed cows using chopped water hyacinth mixed with other vegetables. Then the waste from the cows is treated to produce methane gas, which can be used as fuel for cooking, lighting, or powering an engine. And with global warming getting worse, developing alternative sources of energy will be more urgent than ever.
Maybe in the future, people will love water hyacinth instead of hating it.
Yes, that's very likely if we can make full use of this weed.
That is the end of part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to part 3.
Hi everyone. What I'm going to talk about today is organic farming. Let's first look at what organic farming is. It can be defined as one or more systems of production which don't use synthetic fertilizers, man-made pesticides, herbicides, antibiotics, or livestock feed additives to grow crops and raise animals. Virtually all organic farmers prefer to use renewable resources and recycling to give what conventional farmers might consider waste back to the soil of Mother Nature. From this, we can see organic farming is a sustainable production system, which is one of its advantages. Organic farmers use numerous techniques to promote the quality of life of plants and animals within existing ecosystems and minimize pollution that occurs with all conventional farming practices. Another benefit is that, with the increasing consumer demand for a healthier, more nutritionally balanced product, the sales of organically produced food are promoted. According to the research, it has become the fastest growing sector of agriculture and has shown an annual increase of at least 20% during the last 6 years. What's more, both chemical fertilizers and synthetic pesticides consume non-renewable resources such as oil and coal, but the development of organic farming can lower the demand for these fertilizers and pesticides, so it is conducive to the conservation of essential energy. At the same time, it also can reduce industrial pollution caused by the production of these chemical substances. Organic farming differs greatly from the traditional one in a number of ways. Let's discuss it from the perspective of agricultural biodiversity, firstly. For instance, earthworms are an important indicator of soil fertility. Studies have shown that the density and species number of earthworms in organically managed soils are 3 times as high as those in conventional fields. Moreover, the biodiversity in organic farming can also be reflected in the number of insects, which is twice as many as those in traditional farms. This might be highly related to the fact that organic vegetables are grown without any human-made pesticides, making these vegetables more likely to be damaged. The other main difference between organic and traditional farming lies in crop yields, one of the biggest concerns of organic farmers. Organic farms, though possibly well adapted for certain local environments, produce less food per unit of land. For example, organic vegetables like tomatoes and potatoes yielded are 40% less than conventional ones. In addition, research has also found the number of weeds produced in winter is about 90% at present, which has decreased by 10% than before. However, lower crop yields in organic farming are still inevitable at the moment. Anyway, organic farming is a new direction for agricultural development. These days, a variety of organic products are cultivated not only for humans but also for animals. For example, organic grass. It is commonly used in organic farms to feed cows. Because of the non-use of synthetic fertilizers or pesticides, it can protect cows from diseases brought by large-scale breeding, thus ensuring the quality of raw milk. But an interesting phenomenon is that its production has remained constant these years, which is quite unique compared with other types of crops. Research on organic farming has covered various aspects and involved many countries. According to one study, organic farming was proposed in India in the early 1960s, when it was faced with acute shortages of food grains due to the ever-increasing population and natural disasters. although it could not be applied successfully at first. As farmers had been familiar with conventional instructions, proponents of organic farming claimed that organic agriculture emphasized biodiversity and effective soil management could enhance the capacity to mitigate and even reverse the effects of climate change. So, India needed organic farming along with modern scientific agriculture. The study shows that in 2016, India became the country with the largest number of organic products, and the production of crops kept growing year on year. Another international review about organic farming presents in the first part that people today have become increasingly interested in organic food, and this opinion is quite the same as that of other articles. But what impressed me most was the volume of the investigation the author did in different countries. He conducted a survey in 99 countries, of which 66 are convinced that organic farming is beneficial to animals, while 8 hold the opposite opinion, and the remaining 25 say it is inconclusive. Therefore, the last part of the review is mainly talking about whether organic farming brings positive effects to animals. We can see there are different views about the advantages of organic farming. Some may think it can provide more nutritious and healthier food. Others may say it can protect the natural environment and benefit wildlife. However, as far as I'm concerned, it's you, the ones who buy organic products, that will decide what they can bring to you, because market demand determines everything. Okay, that's all I want to say. Now, let's open it up for discussion.
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
In my presentation, I'm going to talk about salt. In modern times, when we talk about salt, people may associate it with high blood pressure or increased heart risk, and many health experts warn that we should use less salt in our meals and dishes. However, we should not ignore its importance in our cuisine and even in early human history. Salt is one of the oldest, most ubiquitous food seasonings. The taste of salt is one of the basic human tastes. More importantly, salt plays an indispensable role in the health of human beings. For example, it regulates the body's acid-base balance. Because of its importance to survival, salt has often been considered a valuable commodity during human history. This can be tracked all the way back to ancient Greece, ancient Egypt, and ancient Rome, when salt was highly valued and used as a method of trade and currency. In ancient Rome, the busiest road leading to the city was the Via Salaria, which means the salt route in English. A soldier's pay, which partly consisted of salt, was known as salarium argentum in Latin, from which we derived the English word salary. A soldier's salary was cut if he was not worth his salt, an expression still used today. In fact, salt was not only the first condiment discovered, but also the first preservative. We know today that food goes bad because microorganisms in the food multiply in abundance, and a high salt environment is not conducive to microbial reproduction. Extremely high concentrations of salt can even kill microorganisms in the food. The ancients certainly didn't know this, but they did know that salted food can be preserved for a long time. The use of salt as a preservative can be traced to ancient Sweden. At first, hunting was the principal means of livelihood. In this case, meat supplies were unlikely to be frequent. What's more, fewer animals were available for hunting. In order to ensure the supply of meat, many families in Sweden began to raise animals in the surrounding forests during the summer, when the weather was suitable for animals to survive. These animals were fed every day until about 3 to 4 months later. That's in October. They were ready to be butchered for meat, and that was the only month when ancient Swedish people had fresh meat on their table. Then, with the continuous increase in productivity, people finally had some meat left. However, How to store the meat had become a headache until someone invented a whole new way to preserve food, salting. People tried to keep meat from going bad by adding some salt to it, and it could be preserved for several months and even years. There was evidence that salt was widely used to preserve meat. Historical documents in 1573 recorded the Swedish king's everyday meals, mentioning that 175 pounds of meat was consumed each year, but over 150 pounds was salty. From this, we can clearly see the importance of salt in Sweden at that time. In addition, the documents also noted the annual sales of beer in Sweden soared during that period, and this must be related to high levels of salt in their food. Now, let's turn to the sources of salt. Where is salt from? Well, salt is common in nature. It has long been found that salt can be extracted from seawater, mineral deposits, saline lakes, brine, spring, etc., among which the two most important ones are oceans and basins. On the floor of the latter often lie deserts, where traces of salt can be found, such as the Sahara. Furthermore, the quality of different salt types varies a lot. For example, salt from seawater is always mixed with impurities, so after the salt is dried, the sediments and other chemicals need to be purified before eating. However, this is not the case with salt from spring water. We can hardly find any impurities, and the salt level is much more concentrated. Then, how did people distribute salt around the world? Of course, in modern times, we have various ways of transporting goods, but in ancient times, it was not the case. Take ancient Sweden, we mentioned before, as an example. Because of the heavy use of salt in the diet, Sweden could not feed itself and had to import large amounts of salt from other countries. In order to make sure they could buy enough salt from abroad, the Swedish had to attach great importance to shipping and keep it undamaged, as it was the most crucial way at that time. While in other ancient countries, in order to distribute salt to other places, groups of men were employed. They put bags of salt on their shoulders or backs and moved them to the surrounding regions, and gradually these people were considered as a mode of transport in early times. Later, with the improvement of traffic conditions, salt trade between different regions was boosted, and long-distance food trade was also promoted, making communication between different cultures more frequent and...
That is the end of part 4. You now have 1 minute to check.